Right, so the Labour government of Keir Starmer said they had a plan to rebuild the economy and trigger growth going into the general election. They had 14 years of being in opposition to formulate a plan to rebuild the economy after the disasters of recent Tory administrations, the mockery that was the Liz Truss mini-budget, and the consequences of that still ringing in all of our ears, and of course we're still living with the consequences of that in far too many cases. But despite having such a long time to come up with an alternative to what the Tories did, and despite Rachel Reeves making all manner of big claims about her economic prowess and experience, all she did was copy the disastrous austerity plans of maths flunky George Osborne, and has found herself now in an omnishambles all of her own making. We lived through austerity before. Nobody voted for a Labour government standing on a platform of change to see a rerun of that, a rerun of those rancid Cameron and Osborne years, with all of the damage to incomes that brought with that. But especially, nobody voted to see a rerun of a tax on the long-term sick and disabled again as well, made out to be the biggest drain on the society going, with all the fatal consequences that came with that when the Tories did it. And yet here, yet again, to get herself out of a budgetary mess of her own making, Rachel Reeves is now planning an all-new multi-billion-pound assault on these same people, for the sake of calming the economy that she has screwed up. Right, so Rachel Reeves, currently having run off to China to escape from the fallout of her own economic decisions, has behind the scenes been scrabbling around for a solution to her own self-inflicted mess. Having hiked national insurance on employers, she ended up triggering large numbers of job losses as businesses could no longer afford to employ everyone they did. The pound has gone into freefall, a run on the pound that the Labour right and the Tories both said Jeremy Corbyn would cause. It wasn't his plans at all, but Liz Truss first, and now Rachel Reeves who have done just that. The accusers being to blame for bringing around that very event. Anyone might look at that and think, whoops, we should have backed Jez after all, and yeah, you'd be right, but there's no point crying about it now. We've got to deal with what is in front of us. But of course, as tough as it is to look at for those of us who supported Labour under Corbyn, and especially those who scoffed at the idiocy of Liz Truss making completely uncosted spending plans, Labour now look all of the worse because they claimed they had a plan for growth. Instead, borrowing is now more expensive for the government than at any time since 1998, as the gilt market, the government bond market, hit more than 5%. That's quite the interest rate they've created for themselves there. Well, Rachel from accounts, as Reeves has become known now, not the economist she claimed to be at all, is now in panic mode, and has apparently been scrabbling around for ideas from anybody, frankly, of what to do next to try and fix this situation. Her options are, functionally, to fix things properly and instigate a wealth tax and tap the billions and billions in private wealth held by those at the top, or to rehash more Osborneomics, as she's been doing all along, really, by pursuing a course of even more austerity, including, of course, even more spending cuts, which we've already had to put up with for years, and squeeze us all the more. Obviously, option 2 is naturally what she's going to do, because never will a party that owes the wealthy everything that they do, from donations to MPs to the donations to the party itself, dream of biting the hand that funds them, even though the economy and the bulk of British society and services need somebody to now do exactly that. Instead, we've had a stream of different options being mulled in the press regarding what Reeves could do now. She's already attacked pensioners once, having stripped them of the winter fuel allowance. Now she's apparently considering going after their free prescriptions, stripping them from the over 60s. If freezing older people during winter to death won't finish enough of them off, removing their ability to afford access to their necessary medications, and they typically take more of them, and notably roughly half of the UK's 16 million registered disabled people are over 60, it comes across as a political choice based on eugenics as much as poor economics. Well, that is just one option that is apparently floating about that is under consideration. Then, of course, there are the cuts to departmental spending. All of this was coming out ahead of Reeves's planned trip to China. The urging from opposition politicians was for her to cancel that trip and deal with the mess our economy is in here instead. But she didn't. She disappeared off to China to press flesh and tried to gain some Chinese investment in the UK. Let's hope that would trigger some growth. The trouble is, the Chinese investment in the UK currently stands at all of 0.2% apparently. So it doesn't amount to a hill of beans as far as the grand scheme of our GDP goes. Her trip largely, therefore, a pointless jolly when she should be here dealing with the mess her budget has caused. Now, bond markets have risen all over the world, and Labour defenders will be pointing to this as an excuse to both calm Labour critics and defend the Lego-headed Osborne copycat passing herself off as an economist. But if that were the case, why are so many on the Labour backbenches losing faith in Reeves themselves? So many of them hand-picked yes-men by Keir Starmer, after all, when he rigged those candidate selections. So we can't say they're all rotten lefties, because there's so few of the left. But equally, the fear is that cuts to non-protected departments, and one that has come into sharp focus particularly here, is the Department for Work and Pensions, a favourite department of George Osborne's, after all, to give a solid kicking to time after time. A hike in the state pension age to 70 is being mooted heavily. Some have even been talking about the state pension ending up being means tested. And for people who have paid national insurance all their working lives in the belief that they were paying into their state pension pot, that would come as an especially bitter blow to them to find out that actually it is treated as a benefit these days, and benefit claimants are coming in for an almighty assault, as is being reported today. The caveat here is that this is being reported in the right-wing mainstream media, but given how much they revelled in benefit cuts previously, and indeed how much it has matched some of the terrifying language of people like Rachel Reeves and DWP boss Liz Kendall, and they are looking to make billions in savings here, save Reeves's bacon and make sure she doesn't break her own fiscal rules, and are prepared to do that off the backs of the sick and disabled. Now, the government mantra to excuse this is the same that it has always been, that Labour are the party of work. And of course, when work pays so little, and when the income tax threshold never goes up, more people are seeing more of their meagre incomes disappearing as their incomes never go up, and their cost of living crisis only ever increases. More and more people in work, therefore, are becoming benefit claimants to top up their income so they are able to live on it. And of course, more and more people are becoming aware of this too. So I don't feel the attacks on benefits land quite as well as they used to. However, when you turn solely to those who are long-term sick and disabled, for some reason people still feel this is a group that deserves to be hit. People already on low incomes and having to deal with health issues on top of that. I've never understood the perversion of British society that leads people to hate them more than the very wealthy who are not paying their share, and who become even more wealthy through the austerity years that hurt so many of us. Yet still that is Labour's plan, and as such it is personal independence payment or PIP rules looking set for yet another overhaul, to boot even more people off the support they very clearly need. But hey, when the assessors aren't medically trained, then it doesn't matter, does it? As a self-proclaimed party of work, though, it's worth noting that PIP is literally a lifeline for many disabled people to be able to get to work themselves. And without it, they may not be able to work at all. So this targeting of PIP would be discriminatory by actively harming disabled people to access work. It's a move likely to end up in the courts over discrimination, I fancy. But that is quite aside from it being an essential additional income to support additional needs with day-to-day activities, such as accessing treatments and accessing medical appointments, as so many of the people in this demographic need. It is a sign of a civilised society that looking after those who need more help. And we should be proud we live in such a society where we choose to help people like this, and not be proud of politicians or people who are hard of thinking, largely dumbed down by the mainstream media, sadly, who get off on persecuting them, get off on such stories and take advantage of them to enact cruel policies that these people should be attacked and penalised instead, and that this should win anybody's vote. As for the inevitable, but some are lead swingers, some are on the take argument, I'm not even going to brook that discussion. When the fraud in the benefit system is 360 times less than the amount of money lost to our economy through tax avoidance and evasion, and that the amount of benefits that goes unclaimed each year is 10 times that which is lost to fraud. If the economy is what matters, the government are blatantly, therefore, targeting the wrong people, the wrong demographic. But we all know why that is, don't we? Just as we had a slash and burn approach from the Tories, it's cut, cut, and cut again from Starmer's Labour. And it's the same old targets they're going after that Cameron and Osborne did, which will harm lives drastically and not make much of a difference at all to the economy. For as long as we keep electing parties owned by and only ever protecting the interests of the rich and their assets, this country is never going to recover. Meanwhile, also on a massive boot-licking mission is David Lammy, a man who will never not sell out to forward his own interests. He's done this not once, not twice, but 4 times over in just the last week, shaming the nation and demonstrating just how craven Starmer's Labour really are. To get all the details of how he's embarrassed all of us this week in this video recommendation here, as you suggested next watch, Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't already done so to ensure you don't miss out on new daily content, and help support the channel, of course, which is massively appreciated. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.